So, first of all, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you are here joining us. Really blessed about this, that so many people from so different places joined us. Reading the chat, I also understand that's a great gap in the temperatures. There are some people who are sweating in the heat, and others are already trembling a bit, like we here in Europe. So my name is Wolfgang Meyer, and I have to guide you through the session. I have to apologize that Steffi Krapp was not able to join us. He's somewhere in a mountain area, and unfortunately her internet connection was worse. So you have to understand, we are living here in an LDC country, in a least digitalized country of the world. So in Germany, sometimes it is difficult. I hope my internet connection will be stable. It has been during the last week. So, well, first, I want to, well, we already introduced us by discussing about Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden, whatever. But, first, I have the pleasure to introduce our guests today. Now, let me start with Maria Bustello from Spain. I should have had her CV here. Yes, okay. So Maria is an associate professor of political science and public administration at the University of Madrid, and she is there also the director of the Master on Evaluation of Program and Public Policies. This is one of the, let's say nowadays, well-established masters in Europe. There are not so many, but this one here, I don't know how long it is, but it is one of the elder ones, at least. And she was also, in former time, the president of the European Evaluation Society, so she's also well informed about the European developments. And she is a member of the executive board of the Spanish National Agency of the Evaluation of Public Policies, which is also some very, let's say, Europe at least, a very well-known institution for evaluation. And well, what should else I say? She has also been integrated in the UN Women Global Evaluation Committee. So she is also a bit aware of what is happening in the world, not only in Spain and in Europe. And she has, of course, done a lot of applications on evaluation theory and methodology. And she has also contributed to the Evaluation Globe, which I will introduce in a minute. So thank you, Maria, for joining us. It was a great pleasure to have you here. Second women in our round, I want to introduce, well, we already mentioned that it is 6 o'clock in the morning in Mexico. So I'm really happy that you've done that. Claudia Maldonado, she is a professor of public administration at the Center for Research and Training in Economics in Mexico City. She is specialized in evaluation and social policy, and well, she's also in several debates about Latin America, and she has also contributed to IPDET last week in a workshop, and she has contributed on Mexico in our Evaluation Globe project. But, she also had done a lot of applications on the situation of evaluation in Latin America. Sorry, I just got the message I should stop my sharing of the screen. Well, that's true. I have to do that. Sorry about that. Yes. Oh, thank you, Claudia, for joining us that early in the morning. And we are, of course, also keen to hear your contributions on the Globe project. Before I come to that, I have to introduce Reinhard Stockmann. Reinhard is a professor for sociology at the Saarland University, and he is a founder of the Center for Evaluation. Center for Evaluation is one of the partners of IPDET, and we are also the place, because I'm also a member of the Center for Evaluation, we are the only place in Germany where you can study a Master of Evaluation. And we are hosting also the only German language journal of evaluation. And this is also not, let's say, for several years. It's more than 10. So I'm telling this, I'm always feeling old, therefore I never tell it's so old, yeah.
It's more than 15, Wolfgang. You are older than you think.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. Thank you, Reinhard, for joining us. He will present the results of the first comparative results of the GLOBE project between the Americas and Europe. So, but now it is about time to say a word about the GLOBE project. Well, we are, well, as all evaluators probably, we are always talking about the evaluation as a success story. If you look at this, let's say the early beginning is very difficult to really say when it started. If it comes to some kind of organizations or training courses and such things, so it's somewhere in the 70s, 80s. And so we have now more than 40 years of expansion. So there's a lot of evaluation and it's still increasing during the last time, though we didn't reach the horizon, so to speak. And it's both in the country areas. There's almost no country in the world where you do not have any kind of evaluation. Sometimes it's only because of the internationals, but in many cases, there are also national and regional offices and activities. So from this perspective, we always say it is a success story. But the idea of the GLOBE is to have a look at the institutionalization. So question of the importance of institutionalization, it's really, let's say, at the moment, a very interesting one. If you look at the COVID-19 crisis, this is one of the reasons why we called it evaluation failed. Because if you look at all these debates and discussions at the moment about the COVID-19 process, you always hear a lot about measures work. Well, elder people probably among us know this. At the first time I've been in an evaluation project, this is even more than 15 years ago, the first thing was that those program managers says, well, my program works. Full stop. If you ask him, why, where do you know? And then he gives a lot of reasons, but no data, no facts. It was just a belief. And if we are now listening to our leaders, and if they say, oh, the measures work, it's always, they're doing totally different things, and sometimes the course seems to be very stupid. Measures works, full stop. Nobody is doing evaluation. Then we have on the other side, we have people on the roads. So this is also scaring. There are so many people who are now demonstrating against the measures of Corona. And there's even some kind of rumors at several places in the world about these measures. And there are some really stupid theories about that. Well, here in Germany, for example, a lot of people believe that it is Bill Gates who want to make a lot of money out of the campaigns, the health protection campaigns for himself. For me, it's very, very difficult to understand what the theory is behind that. You have a lot of people who believe in such things, and they are going on the streets and demonstrations and they're shouting. No one, at none place in the world, no one is saying we need evaluation, test, measures. So civil society obviously is also not interested in evaluation at the moment. So if we look at our professions, this means let's look at these huge evaluation societies, like, for instance, the European one, but even more the American evaluation associations. And if you look at their publications, there's a lot about COVID-19, no doubt. Nobody's saying we should use evaluation to test the measures. So we really need evaluation. Obviously, for COVID-19, this is really harming everybody, and it is huge measures which a huge impact in almost all society parts. There's also no discussion about that. We do not use evaluation. have we failed? And this failed may be somehow linked to the institutionalization process. And this was the idea to say, okay, let's talk about these pictures we have now from two continents, from Europe and the Americas, meaning North and South America, to understand what is working here in the institutionalization process. And those people who are not from Europe and Americas, don't worry, these are the first two books, and we started with Europe because we are Europeans for sure. And we have to look at North America at least, because this is the most advanced societies in the world and the most established evaluation culture. We will come to Africa and Asia in the next steps. So we are preparing that. And we will start during this year with the next step. I'm not quite sure at the moment if it should be Asia or it should be Africa. So the reason for that is quite simple, that it is sometimes a question of availability of people and opportunities. And at the moment, we think there are a lot of good opportunities in Asia, so maybe it's Asia first. Anyway, we will have a look at these continents too. And of course, the situation is different because as far as I know from Africa, and I'm involved in some countries, there's a lot of dynamics at the moment. There's a lot of evaluation coming up and growing up in several countries. Well, not only in South Africa, which already has a certain tradition, but also in Uganda or in Ghana or in other parts of Africa. A lot of people are talking and thinking about evaluation. So this is quite interesting. And the situation is even more difficult to overview, at least in Asia. So, okay, that's how the situation is at the moment. And we have now the results from Americas, meaning Latin America and North America. And there's one interesting point to say, okay, well, there's one big difference, of course. People in Latin America speak in Spanish and in North America English. And not forget the Brazilians, and maybe Quebec may be a bit annoyed if we don't think about the French-speaking countries. It is, of course, a very interesting question if there's also a difference in the culture and in the institutionalization of evaluation. Then, of course, looking back to Europe, we already discussed that differences in Europe. Of course, we have also the old Europe. It was sometimes called in the discussions in the European Union, meaning the western and northern part of Europe, and the new Europe, those countries who came a bit later into the European Union or still not in the European Union. And there's also, of course, some differences in the meaning of evaluation. And well, I think Maria will talk about that a bit later, also take this into account. So this was a lot of talking from my side. Now it is about time to switch to the presentation. Just give you some few introduction into how it will work. So the first thing is we will have the presentation from Reinhard. It will be about 20-25 minutes. And then we will have two comments by Claudia and Maria. And then we will just discuss in the small round. And by the way, you are able to ask questions via a special tool, a chat tool. And I will hand over to Matt to explain that. So Matt, can you give first a short introduction to that?
You want it now, the introduction?
Yeah, let's tell the people.
Okay, it's a free program, and it's called Speak Up, speakup.info, and I give you this link here in the chat, and I will show you a short screen presentation, and then you see how it works. It's totally easy. So we do it at the end of the session.
Okay, this was just to probably we are not using the chat here because it's too many people and will overflow. So it's much easier to follow up in this tool. And you are able to ask questions anytime then. And we will take this into account and have finally a round where we give answers on these questions. So this is a way to do it with a lot of people. Therefore, it's not possible just to speak for everyone. Otherwise, we will get totally mixed up. Oh, but that's the point where I want to hand over to Reinhard for doing his presentation. So,
Okay.
it's your
Thank
turn.
you very much, Wolfgang, for your kind introduction. I want to show you my presentation. Do you see the presentation? I can't see it. Is it? You see it? Okay, fine. Okay. So, welcome to everybody. I want to talk about the institutionalization of evaluation. And as Wolfgang told you, that's a research project we started at the University of Saarbrücken. And actually, the idea was that we noticed that there is a big demand for evaluation, and evaluation is booming worldwide. And that there is a lot of information about evaluation approaches, about theories, methodologies, and so on. But there is very, very little knowledge about the institutionalization from a global perspective. Wait 1 minute, please. So, yeah, so maybe this gives you an impression how the situation is. So we know very little about the institutionalization of evaluation. As I said, from a global perspective, and to correct this shortcoming, we have launched our Evaluation Globe project. And actually our goal is to examine the role of evaluation in countries over all continents where evaluation takes place. So 2 studies now, Wolfgang mentioned it before, are now available. That's one about Europe and one about the Americas, and studies about Africa and Asia will follow in the next 2 years. And to mention that today, that's the first time that we present results about Europe and the Americas in the first comparison. So that's so far it's a quite special day for us today. So first of all, I would like to let you know what I will not talk about in my presentation. So I will not introduce the theoretical concept of our study to you, from which an analysis grid was deduced that is binding for all authors. Secondly, I will not present our methodological approach and the associated quality assurance measures. And I will not tell you anything about our country selection. Instead, it is the institutionalization of evaluation in 3 social subsystems I would like to present to you in a comparative way. That's the political, the social, and the professionalization system. And I will then go into depth on the coherence between these 3 systems, the driving forces that have pushed the development of evaluation. And finally, I will discuss the challenges that evaluation faces. In order to analyze evaluation in the political system, the first step was to examine the legislative anchoring. The results show that there is hardly a country in Europe where evaluation is required by national law. In Americas, it's exactly the opposite. There is hardly a country in which evaluation is not regulated by national law. So for evaluations to be strongly institutionalized, another factor is how evaluation is anchored in organizations. This means that there are independent national or sectoral organizations and or evaluation units in ministries and authorities to conduct evaluations. Here too, the countries of the Americas perform somewhat better than the Europeans. With one exception, that's Bolivia, all countries, all American countries, have organizational evaluation structures. In Europe, these are significantly fewer. It's only 5 countries from 16 where they have organizational evaluation structures in organizations. Another factor for us, or an important item, is the role of an evaluation office. In the role of an audit office in evaluation. Yeah, because we said if the audit offices in a country also conduct evaluations, this strengthens evaluation in a country. So if you have a look at that, the tide is turning. So in Europe, 7 out of 16 national audit offices, you can say half of them, carry out evaluations. But in the countries of America, only 2 out of 11, and these are Chile and the United States, the audit offices also have a role in the field of evaluation. Okay, so let's say that's the institutional structure, the laws, the decrees, the organization embedding of evaluation, and the role of the audit offices in the field of evaluation. But a very different question is if evaluation has been used, if the different actors in the political system are using evaluation. So if we look at that, with a few exceptions, we can say, or let's say, if we look firstly at the parliament, the role of the parliament, is the parliament using evaluation results, then we can say, with a very few exceptions, the parliaments in both in Europe and the Americas are not interested in evaluations at all, right? So that's, I think, a very interesting result, which is true for the Americas and Europe. Yeah, and if we have a closer look at the use, then we can do that if we look at the sectors in which evaluations are used. So let's say to say something about the sectoral spread of evaluation. And if we look at that, we can say that in only a few countries, evaluation is regularly used in more than 7 sectors. So mostly, in the most countries, evaluation is very much focused just on a few sectors. And if we compare Europe and Americas, there's also a great similarity, because the both sectors where evaluation is most used are education and health in the Americas and in Europe. And if one considers the use of evaluation in the political system in Europe measured in intensity and frequency by which evaluations are carried out, it can be seen that this is relatively high in only 2 of 16 countries. As in Europe, only in 2 of 16 countries, you would say that there is really a high intensity and a high frequency where evaluation is used. And only in 6 countries, this intensity is very low. If we have a look at Latin America, then we could say that in more than half of the countries, they have only a very low score. So that much about the institutionalization and the use of evaluation in the political system. So overall, it can be said that in the Americas, there's a higher degree of legislative and organizational anchoring of the evaluation than in Europe, but the degree of implementation measured by sectoral spread and scope, with the exception of the United States and Canada, is significantly lower. This is symbolized here. If you see the legislation in America is much higher than in Europe, but the use is much higher in Europe than in the Americas. So that means in Latin America, we have a massive implementation gap of the legal requirements, which we can observe. And if one examines the the correlation between the degree of institutionalization and the degree of use of evaluation in the political system, one finds that there is a medium correlation between the two dimensions, both in Europe and in North and South America. That is, the legislative and the organizational anchoring supports the extent to which evaluation is used in the political system. But the institutionalization of evaluation is far away to guarantee its use. Furthermore, the other way around, it can be stated that there is no country in which there is no legal framework, and yet evaluations are carried out to a large extent. Okay. As a next item, I would like to comment briefly on the results of the institutionalization of evaluation in the social system. It applies equally for both Europe and the Americas, that evaluations are only carried out and used by a few civil society organizations for their own purposes. So society's knowledge of evaluation is very low. Many evaluation reports are indeed accessible to the public now, but nevertheless, a public discussion about evaluation results takes place in hardly any country, not even in the United States as the leading country in evaluation. Media only report on evaluation if the results can be scandalized. And the participation of civil society in evaluations hardly takes place, and there is also no demand for it by the civil society, not even in the United States. And for me, the most surprising result is that there is no difference between Americas and Europe. Of course, there are differences if you look at singular countries, but if you look in general at the situation in Europe and compare it in general with the situation in the Americas, there is no difference. So the civil society does not play any role in evaluation, if you say it very dramatically. And I think this is a devastating result, because it shows that evaluation is primarily an instrument of governmental institutions in Latin America, even more than in Europe. And while the political and social system stimulates the demand for evaluation, the professionalization system mainly represents the supply side. So let's have now a look at the professionalization system. What can we say about that system? And there we can see that in half of the 16 European and in half of the 11 American countries, university master programs are offered. I think that's a quite a good result. And in all countries in Europe and Americas, you have forms of professional associations and networks in all countries. And if you look at the journals, then in Europe there are 3 journals, and these are exclusively dealing with the topic of evaluation. In America, 3, including Canada and the United States. That means that in all of Latin America, there exists only 1 evaluation journal, and that's one is in Brazil. And compared now to these first 3 aspects of professionalization, so I mean, are there academic programs, are there professional associations, are there scientific journals for communication? We now have a look at another criterion, that's the one of, let's say, standard setting or certification. And in that item, both continents, the Americas and Europe, they score rather poorly. So it should be noted that most countries in Europe and Americas have no such system or standards. So exceptions to this are in Europe, Switzerland and Germany, and in the Americas, Canada and United States. In Latin America, most countries follow the evaluation standards developed by the Latin American and Caribbean Network of Monitoring, Evaluation and Systematization, RELAC. So on the whole, can be stated for both continents that there is a high degree of professionalization. Maybe not, it's not so true if you look at the standards and the standard systems and on the certification system. But in general, you can say there is a quite well-developed professionalization system. And now, behind this, there was the hypothesis that a high degree of professionalization also dominates in countries where there is a high demand for evaluation. Yeah, say, okay, if there's a high demand, then the professionalization system will produce the supply which is needed. So that was our idea, that was our hypothesis. But this hypothesis cannot be confirmed either in Europe or in the Americas. So in other words, there are countries which, despite a high demand for evaluation, have only a weak professionalization system and vice versa. Okay, that's also for us a quite astonishing result. So let us now turn to the question of what have been the driving forces for the development of evaluation, what have been the push factors. And if we have a look at that, then we must say, regarding to the political system, the answer is surprisingly simple and very clear. Despite the enormous political, social, and cultural differences within Europe and the Americas, and even more so between these continents, there is one clear, identifiable force. And these are the reforms aimed at modernizing and rationalizing the administration. So in the context of new public management concepts of output or results-oriented or outcome-oriented management concepts. This was the driving force behind evaluation in all the countries we have investigated in Europe and in the Americas. And you know, in order to procure the new management information needs, if you have an outcome or an output-oriented system, you need new techniques and instruments to provide the data which are necessary for such a management concept. And that's the point where evaluation comes into play, because evaluation can provide this new output and outcome-related information. And we really can say, without this kind of administrative modernization, and without the ideas of evidence-based policy and the concept of making strategic, political, and administrative decisions based on rational information underpinning, evaluation would have remained insignificant. In the United States and later in the other American countries, the origins of evaluation are even more strongly linked to the establishment of planning, programming and budgeting systems than in Europe. The aim was to improve national control and establish budgeting for result systems. And therefore, evaluation is still used primarily for accounting and control purposes, especially in Latin America. Another driving force for the development of evaluation in Europe is the European Union. By making the performance of evaluations one of the mandatory conditions of receiving subsidies from the EU Structural Fund, evaluation now also came to be practiced in those countries which had not previously applied the concept. In Latin America, this role of the European Union was taken over above all by national and international donor organizations, which have evaluated the projects and programs they supported and thus set best practice standards. On the other hand, evaluation capacity building was and is actively supported by the IEG of the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, the CLEAR centers, and some national donors like Germany. Okay, so finally, I would like to emphasize a few challenges, some of which to be found both in European countries and the Americas, but of course in a varying in varying degrees. So since evaluation activities are primarily limited to the political system, there is a risk that evaluation is increasingly interpreted as a kind of technology of bureaucracy, turning into a rigid routine involving largely standardized and streamlined processes. And especially in Latin America, evaluation suffers from a control image. In many cases, evaluation is perceived as a threat, and not as a learning or even enlightening instrument. This is not least due to the fact that evaluation is used for accountability purposes, I would say much more in Latin American countries than in Europe. Thirdly, as has been shown, evaluation is not very widespread in civil society in both Europe and the Americas. Is hardly noticed or even actively demanded by the state. As long as this lack of interests among civil society organizations, the media, and political parties continue, there will be no public pressure on politicians to give evaluation a higher status or to involve civil society actors in evaluations. As shown, the degree of professionalization is quite strong in North America and Europe, but significantly weaker in Latin America. The quality of evaluation suffers as a result, especially when there do not exist any training programs, standards, or certification systems. But even countries with a high degree of professionalization have challenges to overcome. The following are explicitly to be mentioned. The short lifespan in the offered evaluation programs leads to a high fluctuation and an uncertain training situation. This is especially true for Europe. Since there are only a few evaluation journals, many contributions on evaluations are published in other specialized publications that are not perceived within the evaluation community. So actually you can say they get lost. And a massive challenge for evaluation worldwide is the growing belief in alternative facts that do not require empirical evidence, but claim validity exclusively on the basis of the vehemence and volume with which they are presented. This applies not only to those countries in which populist governments are in power and which cultivate a post-truth leadership style, as the corona crisis shows. Even broad strata of society in properly governed countries are vulnerable to absorb conspiracy theories, however illogical they may be. But when evidence no longer counts for much, disciplines such evaluation, which produces empirically proven facts with scientific roughness, are facing hard times, right? But I do not want to conclude with such a pessimistic perspective. On the contrary, the United States and Mexico, to give two examples, show that evaluation can succeed even in times of political pressure on fact producers like evaluation, at least as long as there is a legal framework for it. So that's also the reason that I think that legal frameworks for evaluation are so important. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm looking forward to your questions and to our internal discussion. Thank you very much. Wolfgang, your mic is muted.
Yeah, it's still muted. Yeah, thank you, Reinhard. I'm clapping my hands here in a virtual way. And Of course, this is a very interesting final word. Say, okay, we have some populists in US, everybody knows, but also building a bridge towards the Michigan case. So yes, that's giving me the opportunity to get Claudia into this discussion. Well, yes, that's true. There's some new challenges for Naval and probably the whole Mexican evaluation community. As Reinhard already shown, there are several very specific and interesting, unique challenges in Latin America at all. So maybe Claudia, it's your turn to comment.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for this very kind invitation. I think you are, with the GLOBE project, you are driving a very, very important comparative discussion. And of course, you give us a very sobering picture of the real scope and the real implications that evaluation can have in a democratic governance setting. I think some of the threats to evaluation that you have pointed out, which are more political and more broadly, are part of a larger crisis of the democratic delivery and legitimacy that we are seeing unexpectedly both in long and well-established democracies and in the new democracies that are fragile and somehow weak that characterize Latin America. So I want to go back to that and share some of the political economy that we are seeing in Mexico, but I want to give it a Latin American perspective to it, because I think what Reinhard pointed out is very, very important. The original push for the adoption of legal safeguards, special organizations, even independent bodies with constitutional autonomy in the Latin American systems has to do with two things that coexisted together in the historical juncture, which was the transitions to democracies, the so-called third wave of democracies, right when we were getting out of the lost decade for development in Latin America. So you have this elective affinity between the democratic will to control power. I always like to rephrase Aaron Bildavsky with respect to evaluation. Evaluation is also a form of speaking truth to power. And that's something that you can only do if certain basic democratic guarantees are in place. So this was an important original push for institutionalization, as Chelimsky has pointed out at some point, and Carol Weiss, that this is the healthy distrust of democratic governance is also at the heart of the need for evaluation and the demand for evaluation. So it's a distrust from government that is cushioned by democratic guarantees. So the opposition is interested, some certain, not all civil society, but very specific watchdogs organizations are pushing for this as a form of making the government accountable and ensuring that there is space for evidence-based political criticism of public decisions. This is very important. But in the Latin American case, the convergence of this type of push with the very strong internationally driven and also internally driven by the finance ministries and the planning ministries is that this was seen as a modernization tool in order to control the budget. And controlling the budget, especially in presidential systems, which have a different form of debating and bargaining over public resources than parliamentarian systems, entail super strong finance ministries, planning ministries that are in themselves very technocratic and detached from wider democratic discussion. So in a form, and I really like the way Reinhard phrased it, this developed originally, I wouldn't claim it's like we lost track along the way. I would say also it's a provocation that this is what these things were meant to do since the beginning. They were designed, they were sponsored, and they were promoted as an internal technology for budget control. And budget management everywhere is very detached from participatory mechanisms, more open dialogue, these visions of democracy that are embedded in our concepts of use. So when we put these two things together, we have a system, we have a series of laws that are trying to prevent future democratic majorities from getting rid of evaluation. It's the perception that if if left-wing governments come, they will do away with evaluation, and they will bring public spending to a problematic level like before the 1982 crisis, which is a very, very important, landmark, historical landmark for policymaking in Latin America and public budgets. So this is a concern. So one would argue even that evaluation and its institutions are thought of as a lock-in mechanisms against democratic majorities on doing this technocratic technology that is designed especially to control budget levels, expenditure levels. So what's the standard Chilean, Colombian, also Mexican story at the origins, this is at the origins, was related to this. To the extent that those constraints have changed, because most Latin American countries have increased their internal source of revenue, there are stronger domestic markets, and there are also other international commitments in place that provide for this budget discipline, such as free trade, globalization, et cetera, et cetera. So there are all these other constraints that are enforcing discipline around budgets, like sovereign debt, et cetera. And the other factor that is changing is the push and the quality of democratic pluralism. And this is something we see and this, I want to go to the Mexican case. The Mexican case was perceived just a couple of years ago as a leading force in the institutionalization of evaluation. And there's a reason for which CLEAR ended up in Mexico and not Chile or Colombia, which have been clearly leaders in the field before, is that there were these two things. There was this strong commitment of technocratic control over the budget, but also this rising pluralism that created a lot of momentum for civil society and even the opposition parties to embrace evaluation as a form of accountability, as a form of political horizontal accountability. When these two factors that were very important domestic push factors that strengthened Coneval, strengthened the role of evaluations, the budgets for evaluations, the rules for evaluation, et cetera, these two things changed. The first thing is that we have a new government that has absolute democratic majority in everything for decision making. So even in a presidential government where you always have minority governments trying to bargain their policy preferences with the wider public, here we are with a phenomenon in which there is a national leader, the president. I wouldn't even say it's a party coalition. It's a national leader that gained more electoral support than anyone in the history of democratic competition in Mexico. And this basically eroded all the standard checks and balances that drove the strength of evaluation. So in the Latin American experience, and I think you are completely right, we saw legislation and high-level legislation, not only national law. In Mexico, we have a constitutional amendment that, you imagine that, no? Imagine that in the US context or Canada. We have a constitutional amendment that says Coneval should be independent from anything because we know the democratic majorities will undo it. And this ex ante, from a European lens, seems like a bulletproof arrangement. And it's exactly the opposite. It's the minimum guarantee to prevent the erosion of evaluation. But when it comes to the real thing, these institutions are just paper if there are not background conditions that support them. And this is the case of Coneval. Coneval is an institution that is well endowed institutionally and constitutionally, that has a technical expertise, and it has the reputation and the soft power to promote its vision and its mission. At the same time, now, I say this with its full disclosure, I'm a council member at Coneval, we are trying to get new sources of leverage, because the usual sources of leverage, the governors, the opposition parties, the NGOs are all being under threat by a hegemonic government that has this political democratic super muscle that basically allows them to do anything, almost everything on their own, with no dialogue, with no open government logic, with no discussion, with no engagement with stakeholders, because they basically control the channels of institutional decision making. So my take is that the political economy that drove to legislation was a political economy of distrust and control. And that the political economy that led to the strengthening of these systems, which is, it's definitely clear in the last decade, virtually every country in Latin America had stronger evaluation practice, stronger evaluation institutions, stronger recognition of the role of evaluation in public discourse and policy dialogue. These things improved, there's no question about it. But the political conditions have changed in many countries. This is the case of Argentina, this is the case of Brazil, this is the case of Colombia, so we are part of a wider era of polarization, of distrust of democratic capacity to deliver. And this has fired a lot of anti-technocratic, quote, quote, anti-scientific, anti-oligarchic modes of public discourse. And this is where populism comes in place, and the post-truth area and everything we are discussing everywhere in the world. So this combination makes it, in my view, a very adverse environment for the strengthening of evaluation and for its use. And just to finish, I would say that in the Latin American context, because we have written legal systems that have somehow rigid constitutional arrangements and presidential systems, the fact that these laws are in place is a good, it's a good asset for those who want to promote, for us who want to promote this and try to fix it. It's a great asset, but it's never going to be sufficient, because the weight of the law is the weight of the political power of those who want to use it, which is something horrible because it's against the logic of the rule of law. But that's exactly how it works. So with this additional muscle, it's going to be very, very hard to promote it. And the last thing I want to say is that also I think that we as a field have to have a different and more nuanced notion of use. Because if what we understand as use is politicians sitting on a chamber, a high-level meeting and saying, so first, give me the evidence and then let's make political decisions. I don't think this is realistic in the most advanced, Habermas-style dialogic democracy. I don't think this is the case. I think what we needs to be strengthened is the actual availability and normal use of evidence in the political dialogue, so that it is organizational internalized. And this is what the COVID-19 crisis is showing, that at the end, we don't have this type of reasoning in our hearts and minds, because this is a moment of stress. And in a moment of stress, citizens look for easy choices and magic pills. And what we expected from democratic governments was to take a higher place and try to guide the population into more reason-based thinking rather than fear-based thinking, which is a perfectly normal response to this type of crisis. It's just human, it's a social fact. So what I think we're seeing is that governments are not doing their part in leading us beyond our fears, and that the mistrust of technocracy, oligarchic speech, and also the over-specialized language of evaluation has created not only an implementation gap, but there's a huge democratic deficit. To phrase it, in the terms of the European Union discussion, these tools have a huge democratic deficit in Latin America. So to the extent that this is real, it's going to be very hard to have standard democratic checks and balances play in the favor of evaluation, because this was originally designed for the finance minister to have this balanced scorecard and make this decision in closed doors. And that's the origins. And I think origins are important because they induce institutional development paths. So if we open up evaluation and if we further clarify and exemplify its utility, its real utility, especially when the house is on fire, which is now, then we are going to be able to reduce this implementation gap. But ceteris paribus, being this said, my perception is that the political economy in Latin America is very adverse to the continued strengthening of these things. And in my perception, what interested publics and stakeholders have to do is go back to the script of 10, 15 years ago, which is push for the permanence of evaluation, like just protect the house, and then talk about these additional features that we want evaluation to do for democratic governance and quality. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Claudia. Well, a lot of very interesting points, I think. Before we start to discuss a bit about these and of course also Reinhard things, I think we should add Maria because, well, Spain is a very interesting pitch here. At these days, we always talk about Boris Johnson and Donald Trump and the transatlantic pitch of Britain and North America. This forgets about that there's an even older pitch between the Latin American countries and Spain. And well, Claudia mentioned a lot of specifics in Latin America, and I'm keen to hear if there are similar tendencies in Spain. In the beginning, Maria already mentioned the regional discussions. And of course, the COVID really hit Spain very, very deep. And I remember Maria has written about the impact of the financial crisis in 2008. So it was also serious for Spain. So Maria, the floor is yours. Please give us your comment.
Okay, thank you so much. Wolfgang. And of course, I have to start thanking you also for joining this panel, also with Claudia, and she's always so bright. So thank you. I mean, thank you because it's a luxury to be here, and I really thank you for that. Of course, I have been a little bit like the good student, and I was following the question that you were posing to us about has evaluation failed in a crisis like the COVID-19. So I started like that, but really I will try to put some other issues into the floor because of what Claudia was saying, right? I mean, from my perspective, really, the COVID-19 crisis has put everything upside down. And evaluation is not an exception, right? I mean, I think really this crisis has really left us with a really naked way of seeing things that before were a little bit more hidden. Like, for example, everything about inequalities and privileges around the world. Things like how we organize our lives. For example, we have seen how vulnerable we all are. And of course, this has to be, for example, for me, it's very clear how it has been neglected, absolutely neglected. For example, the importance of care, right? Of care each other, the interdependency of this care, how we need, how vulnerable we are, how much do we need to care. And of course, all these measures to contain the virus that is mainly about confinement, okay, it's lockdown, confinement, and go to the household, okay, and of course this is we have seen that we have our work life, our productive life, in a way organized that is not sustainable of life, right? I mean, we have seen, and for example, and of course we have the whole thing about For example, the gender impact that has been absolutely incredible about the COVID, right? Women have suffered much more in the lockdowns and confinement. And of course, we have seen all these inequalities, right? I mean, in general, I'm not going to talk about that. But of course, something that we have also seen, I think it's the rise of this populism and the era of the fake news, right? And this threat to democracy. And that's something that we have seen very clearly also with the COVID-19. And of course, all this need not only to strengthen the democracy, but also about the need for evidence-based, right, and empirical evidence to try to do that, right. Of course, and Wolfgang was also saying that if I can talk about this crisis and concretely in Spain, and of course, in Spain we need an evaluation, especially a big effect of the 2008 crisis. Of course, it was a general crisis, and of course now in Europe we know very well that it was all these austerity policies that were the response by the European Union and by all Europe. Okay, were not a good idea. Okay, were not a good idea, and we know that it was not the right response, and this hit very much many countries, I think all countries, but especially the more unequal ones, right? So it was really hit by that. And in evaluation, that was the case. I mean, we had not had the occasion to improve enough the evaluation, institutionalization and evaluation culture to understand in 2008 and from 2008 that evaluation can be part of the response. I mean, that was the problem. The evaluation was like the first expenditure to be cut, okay? Not like, okay, we have a good tool to try to see how to cut better, right? And that was not the case at all. So now what we have is that we have a country not really knowing about all the crisis, with a special hit on the COVID-19 crisis. And this has a kind of a good opportunity to see. We had the other day on Friday, we had the annual seminar that we have from the master in the Complutense University. We had it online, of course, and we were talking about that, and it was very interesting to say that, of course, evaluation has a very important role, not only to evaluate, I mean, what is happening with the virus and everything, but especially for evaluating the responses, I mean, the management of the crisis, right? The responses to the crisis, because that's what we are seeing. And we have very interesting ideas. For example, there was this Eloisa Del Pino, a professor and working on these kind of responses. And she was saying, and that was really interesting, for example, that from the accountability point of view, from the accountability role from evaluation, we had to put into the scene now this idea of using evaluation as a mode of reparation to the people, right? So it was part of the, and I found that so interesting. I mean, not only because political responsible persons have to be accountable to the society, but also this is thinking about, you know, the society and how they should be repaired, right? I mean, like a reparation issue. So we have all these issues, and I would say that what we have with this COVID-19 crisis, and at least this has been happening in Spain also, okay? And I will talk now more about Spain, is that we are we are getting new actors in the evaluation landscape. At least this is the case in Spain. And people are starting to talk about evaluation and claiming evaluation because of this COVID-19 crisis, right? And because of the need to reinforce democracy. So we have started to do that, and for example, let me give you this example, because of course this is so new that I didn't have the opportunity to include it in the chapter for Spain, okay? But for example, we have a new structure in Spain, which is called IPDET, that is like the Fiscal Responsibility Independent Authority, okay? It's a public institution, and with this mission about, how do you say, like to care for the sustainability of the public finances. So it was this idea, and let me tell you, Claudia, because it was this idea of budget control, right? So they have entered in this scene, and because we had this, the IEBAL, the agency, the national agency was eliminated in 2018, right? I think 2017, okay? They found this, this spot to be included, and they are doing very nice studies on this control budgeting. So we are now getting back to something that probably was not so much the origin in Spain, like it was in Mexico, because it was more the idea of deepening the democracy. I mean, this idea of at least when the IEBAL was generated, okay, at the beginning, and of course the claims from the European Union to do that. And now we are really much more, probably because of this crisis, much more on this idea of budgetary control, okay? This idea, of course, we have some problems here. I mean, I always say that the evaluation community, we have been always a very open community, right? So we welcome, and it cannot be another way, we welcome any new actors who want to be in the scene, and this is the case. But of course, we should also be a little bit careful also, in the sense that we can have some, let's say, maybe some disciplinary or methodological or epistemological kind of limitations. Like, for example, these IREF, they are mostly economists, and they have this kind of methodological idea of claiming evidence only from a positivistic and experimentalistic point of view, okay? So we have to be very careful in trying to welcoming all these new actors, but trying to say, okay, we have many, literature, theory, and everything that we have been many years now thinking about evaluation. So we have this idea of sharing, right? So what else? I mean, probably I do not want. Probably I'm about with my timing, right? I didn't Wolfman, how I'm with the time. I'm almost about for the 10.
Yes, you're almost about. But, please go ahead. You still have 1 minute if you want.
Okay, so just to finish here, I would say that I mean, of course, we are all upside down with this COVID-19 crisis, but I think that if we work well, it can be really an opportunity. We have some opportunities here. I think, for example, that thinking from a European point of view about some things that we can learn from the Americas, okay, and probably the other way around, but of course, this idea, for example, I think that coming back to this idea of budgetary control, it might be also a good idea, because that's something that we need to have now, and it's now into the landscape. And I would say that precisely this idea of the social system, okay, the need for the social system and the civil society, and of course the professional system too, they can be, and we can use them also as driving forces. And not only, I mean, not only looking at driving forces as the all European Union and using all these kind of things, or the international things, and of course the public administration and management modernization approaches, that probably they will be a little bit on the back now for that, and probably try to get this idea of the social systems about civil society entering in the public discourse for the need for evaluation. And this, and of course, the responsibility that we have as professionals of evaluation to try to put this into the agenda. So yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Maria. Well, now we should ask if we can prolong this session for at least 1 hour. We have so many interesting points, I think. Before I want to start the first discussion in a small round, I want to hand over to Matt to explain you how you can get a voice in. So I think we start this discussion now, first in a small part, and give you some time to type in some questions. And then we will take on these questions. But Matt will tell you how you can do this.
Okay, I will share my screen. One moment, and you can see in the chat what I wrote to you all. That's not how it looks. And here it is.
Okay, here we are, yeah.
So, use your phone or your browser and type in Speak Up Info. And then there is, you can join the existing room and the room number you see in the last line here, or you use the QR code. Then you're in. Then you can type in your question, and there is a thumb up and thumb down, left and right, so you can vote on questions.
Just to show you, well, I share my screen, I can show you how it looks like. It should be, where are we? Let's see. It should be somewhere here. This is not the right one. Okay. Shit. Where are we? Okay, I have to go there, I think. This is not the right one, it is this one. So this is like the screen looks like, and you can here see the post a message thing, and then you can post in your questions. So let's just show how it should look like and where it works. We are using this because we do not want to overload the chat function here. It's not very easy to overlook this. So, okay, that's just short on this. And I know Reinhard is really keen to, I think he has a lot of questions and interesting comments on Claudia's and Maria's thing. So I would first hand over to you, Reinhard. And then let's have some remarks of Claudia and Maria. Yeah. You have to unmute, Reinhard.
I know. Just a second. Yeah, I think that was a very interesting analysis. So if I listen to Claudia, I think actually she is an expert at South America. She's living there, so she knows better than we do. But I think, or what is for me is, is in some way satisfying me that if we make the analysis of our case studies, we come to similar results as you do. So that means for me, that's a kind of validation of our results, that you don't see it completely differently. And for me, the most astonishing aspect actually is that if you look at really at the differences between the European countries, the cultures, the languages, the political systems, and so on and so on. So even if we wrote the synthesis for the European globe volume, we were astonished that there are, let's say, the similarities, there are more similarities as differences between the countries. So for all countries in Europe, it's the political system which counts. The political system is the driving force. The social system has only a very weak vote on that, and the professionalization system is very disparate. So in some cases, we have strong developed professional systems, in others not. And so the most astonishing thing is that this now repeats in the analysis of the Americas. So even there's not so big difference between North America and South America as we would have expected. It's still the same. It's policy driven. The demand by civil society is low, and then in the professionalization system does not correlate with the demand. So this also it's the same result in most of the countries we have analyzed in Latin America as in Europe. So that we have so much similarities, it's for me one of the most astonishing things. And maybe the reason for that behind is that evaluation is still a new discipline. So we have established more or less institutional structures in form of laws, in form of national decrees, sectoral decrees. There are units established in ministries, authorities. We have independent institutions like Coneval in Mexico or the DEWAL in Germany. But I would say evaluation is still not in the heart or in the mind of the people, and also not in the mind of the people, I mean, of the politicians. Actually, it is something which is not in the center of their thinking. There is, even in Germany, where we have a quite well developed institutionalization of evaluation, I would say that evaluation still lacks an understanding that there is no real an evaluation culture. Because if we would have a culture like that, then it would be not strange, it would be usual that we prove measures if they work or not before we start to spread them all over the country. And there are, especially now in the COVID crisis, I think this shows it very dramatically that this not works like that. So in Germany there are very little studies about measures, if they have any impact. But all the people, as Wolfgang mentioned at the beginning, but all the politicians tell us that the measures work, that there is an impact, but they have no facts on that. And that's, I think that's quite an interesting thing, because in regard to this aspect, the politicians are also like these conspiracy theorists who likewise come up with statements without proving them. But I would say there's a big difference between these two groups, because while the arguments or opinions of the politicians on the effectiveness of measures they enact could be verified, those of the conspiracy theorists are so grotesque that they could not even be verified. And I think this makes really a big difference. But still there is the question, why the politicians, even if the measures could be tested, could be verified, are not tested before they get to a national law, a national decree. And my explanation for that is that we still do not have really an evaluation culture in the political system, even if there are some legal and organizational institutionalization measures, but in the heart, in their understanding, in the mind, the evaluation does not really play a crucial role. And the proof of this is now in the COVID crisis that actually, at least in Germany, but and so it was very interesting to hear to what Maria tells us, that maybe in Spain the situation is completely different, but in Germany nobody talks about evaluation. If they talk about evaluation, then they only talk about the vaccines or the death rate or whatever, but they do not talk to social scientists. They do not talk to evaluators to prove the measures before they spread over all the country.
Thank you, Reinhard. Maybe we could stay at this topic because there's also one question. Maybe you almost put it in the right way as the people here in the chat. And this question was: it was mentioned that evaluation can speak truth to power. How can evaluation be used to build a fact-based counter-narrative, populist discourse, fake news, etc.? So, well, that might be really a question to Maria, because you mentioned that there are at least some tendencies towards this, that evaluation can be used in such kind of public discussions. So, Maria, maybe you can tell us a bit more about this.
Okay. Not sure. I mean, of course, I was like giving two different things. The idea of new actors entering in the scene is not only because of the COVID crisis, right? It was also something also before, but I think this idea of finding ourselves in a crisis, okay, in a kind of, is something that can open a little bit some doors to different to probably a new discourse. I mean, I really think what we are seeing and experiencing about these populisms and the fake news and how easy it was to immediately follow a fake idea without checking what it is there. I think we are learning as a society that we need something different from that. And of course, I'm saying that, and I say that not being, of course, extent of any fear, because we are really, I mean, what we are seeing in the world and is what we are seeing. But I see that the evaluation can be used as an alternative answer for that, or at least that's what I think. And of course, in a more ample way, and I really like what Claudia said about that we need as an evaluation community to open our limits, right? For example, about thinking about what it is used, right? What it is used in evaluation, and we really need to think about that, because we do not have this organized world that we used to have, right? Anymore, right? So maybe that's the way to see. So, I mean, I think we have a lot to do for evaluating, because we are saying about the effectiveness of what? I mean, we are in a crisis of the COVID-19, and we need like to know how effective has been the measures. Effective for what? For containing the virus, the pandemic, for doing that. I mean, with which costs, right? And I think, for example, this idea of looking for the perverse effects, and we will have a lot to evaluate about all this recuperation and how we can do. And of course, for example, I was just trying to remember one of the reports that were commissioned by the Greens, the German Greens, one MP, right, a parliamentarian of the German Green, to do this analysis from a gender perspective, okay, of the new generation EU, that are the mitigation measures and the cooperation measures from the European Union, and it was terrible. It was like the immediate response was putting a lot of money under construction and their agriculture issues and things, and for example, forgetting absolutely about care, for example, and the care systems, and that's what we need now. Okay, that's what we need for overcoming. So yeah, I would just leave this here, and maybe we can keep on talking after that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think that's a very good point you made here. Just to give the voice back to Claudia, and I want to add, well, because there is another question. Now I lost the screen moment. Which is also on this point of, let's say, a more systemic question. How can the existing systems continue to work on helping the public understand the importance of evaluation? So I think there's something in what Maria says. Okay, we are coming to a very serious point. If our democratic system is really able to overcome this kind of attack from the fake news populistic amount using, for example, evaluation results. And the same, of course, also on the side of the civil society. There was also some question about the civil society saying, yeah, well, they do not have money. Well, this is obviously not true for all kind of civil society organizations. For example, if we are speaking also, if you come to North America, we're speaking of the Bill Gates Foundation or the Ford Foundation or such kind of huge organizations with a lot of money. And also if you come to Mexico, well, you do not have a Bill Gates Foundation, but there are a lot of very, very engaged civil society organizations with a lot of power. And which are also very critical to the state. So the question is, well, really, we need something like a systemic change to really make evaluation work, or is it possible that there will be some, let's say, leverage points and incentives to make this system, how it is, work? And I think this question is very good to Mexico, because, well, there's a lot of, let's say, struggling in Mexico to make the state work and make the society work. So Claudia, maybe you can give your thoughts about that.
Yes. Well, okay. So I'm thinking that this is, I think, well, the first thing I want to say is that we should stop expecting the politicians to knock on our door and ask for our evaluation results. Because the truth is that we don't have them with pertinent answers for this short-term decision-making under a lot of complexity and uncertainty. So if politicians had knocked on our door before making the choices about responses, both like the Spanish case, which is seen as an extreme, or the Swedish case, or the Mexican case that nobody knows what it is, because the government basically denies the pandemic. It's almost like surreal. But the point is, if that had happened, we wouldn't have had the tools to address these questions. And I think that's something important to say. And on the good side of this, I would claim that it's still too early to ask for evaluation to have been useful or enlightening, because we are in the middle of the storm. And if we are in the middle of the storm, and if we put on the complexity lenses, it is not the best environment for standard evaluation to produce applicable lessons that will guide you through actions, which is the standard incremental setting of normal policymaking. Now we are in the middle of the storm. Everything is on fire. There is a lot of uncertainty. So you cannot speak truth to power if you don't know what's going on. And that includes the evaluation and the governments and the epidemiologists. So I think we should be humble also in understanding that in the middle of this level of world uncertainty, which is systemic, the solutions are not there in our baggage of tools. The solutions are going to have to be invented from scratch. And the other thing I want to say is that this is that needs to happen with evaluation, but not driven by evaluation. We are not the only source of evidence. We are not the only source of trial and error. And we are not the only source of information, which is very important. So I would place in the short term a lot of much more importance to the role of monitoring. And I'm talking NGO, Facebook-based, Google mobility sources of information. One of the first things we faced at Coneval was that we were unable to do the standard labor statistics because of the confinement. And we have a huge problem with doing telephone national service because of many issues, the digital divide, and these have not been validated. So the point was that politicians who were looking for what was happening to the income of the majority of Mexicans, because there was a huge job loss during confinement, huge, unprecedented. We had never had a crisis like that. We didn't have the standard instruments to do that. And what the ministries did and what Coneval did was like take some phone survey and then take some information from Google. And then look out, and big data and machine learning, who are the ones who right now have a lot of a competitive advantage in gathering information. I don't think gathering information is everything, but that's a part that is much more developed outside evaluation and outside government. And it's not a conspiracy theory. It's like, of course, Facebook and Instagram and whatever, our cell phones are producing more real-time information that is useful. And the bad example for that is how China has used these information systems for surveillance and citizen monitoring without democratic controls. So my take on this is that we still have a lot to do. I really like what Maria mentioned about seeing this as a reparation. We will need a commission of truth because societies have been put under so much stress and harm and suffering that we will need this political reconciliation with what happened and what could have been different, and also to be honest. Because I think the other part of being truthful as citizens is that we have to be aware that the government is as human as the citizens. And we are both facing short-term interest. We have a lot of fear. And even we are asking for the governments to act as if they knew what was going on and give us like some solution that at least calms our fears. So that's one of the reasons for which I think that the government just reacted. We are in the middle of a battle. You don't want some war historian to tell you about the strategic logic that has driven success in wartime before, because this is a new war, this is new information, new actors, and nobody can credibly claim to have control over those. So my last point would be on, I'm an optimist by construction and by principle. I think there is a lot that we will learn. I think there is a very important play for our field in conjunction with other democratic groups and also with experts from other fields. I think machine learning, big data are going to show us a lot of things that we didn't expect from this crisis. And this is information that is being actually gathered. And the third point I want to make is that I think also we have to be better citizens. We have to accept gray areas, we have to accept uncertainty, and we have to accept that no single government can claim to be beyond the cutting edge of the scientific knowledge of humankind. And this is the type of information you would require to build the best policy given controlled information. We cannot know what the best policy is yet, and what we can aim for is to be purposefully learning by doing on the ground. And that's not the standard technical evaluation. That's just like being, very open about all the mistakes you're making on the ground and noticing them in very different ways than the usual standards of information.
So it's my set duty to finish this wonderful discussion because we are over time. Yes. And I know there's so much to say about that. I think there's a wonderful picture. Thank you, Claudia, for that. We are in the middle of the storm. And that's true. And Reinhard already showed us that we are not like the trees who are standing against the storm, well anchored by roots in the floor. So, and I think I also want to end up very positively. What's happening now is most important. Evaluation has to get a strong network. We are not well anchored yet. If we are really getting a global networking and joining forces and developing step by step, not estimate our roles. Yes, that's also important, Claudia. Thank you for that. Then evaluation will have its role and will hopefully still going on to improve. And for sure, we have to have at least 3 or 4 follow-up discussions on that. There's so many topics raised by you both. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Reinhard, for making this possible. And we will keep in touch for sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I should put this one here. Okay, here is a clapping. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Stay healthy.
Stay healthy, yeah.
Thank you to everyone listening out there. It was really nice, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Wolfgang. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.